Imagine this. I became famous overnight just because I decided to walk 1,100 kilometers while dying. But that's not even the craziest part. You won't believe who tried to stop me and why. Let me start from the beginning. 3 years ago, Julia married me, but I always knew she didn't truly love me. She only said yes to spite her ex-boyfriend, Marcus. Even so, I never blamed her or got angry. I stayed calm. Divorce was never an option for me. Not right now. I didn't have the time or energy for court battles. She doesn't know I'm dying, and all I want is to spend the time I have left with her. But even that simple wish seems too much for her. Tonight, she didn't come home. Instead, I saw her trending online, celebrated as the most dazzling actress of the night, surrounded by celebrities, draped in a red gown, the same kind she wore the day we first met. She looked stunning, as always, and I wasn't upset about her being out late. She always brushed off rumors, saying they were just publicity stunts her agency planned. "I've only ever had you," she would say with that teasing smile. I believed her, but tonight felt different. My phone rang. It was Evelyn, Julia's manager. "She's drunk," she told me. "Come pick her up." Even as dizziness and a sharp nosebleed hit me, I rushed to get her. My illness didn't matter, not compared to making sure she got home safely. She couldn't know about it. Julia had too soft a heart for that kind of burden. When I arrived at the bar, my stomach sank. Marcus was there, holding her in a quiet corner. His sharp features and smug smirk hadn't changed a bit. I stepped forward. "Marcus, give her back to me." He looked at me mockingly. "So, you really did marry her, huh?" I ignored him. I pulled Julia into my arms, relieved to have her close again. As I turned to leave, his voice followed me. "Do you even know why she got drunk?" he sneered. "She threw me a welcome back party." I clenched my fists but kept my composure. Julia was kind, maybe too kind. There was no point in arguing. I placed her gently in the car. As I fastened her seatbelt, her eyes fluttered open, and she smiled sleepily. "Adrian, you're here." The frustration inside me melted. I kissed her forehead and whispered, "I'm here. Let's go home." She nodded drowsily and drifted back into sleep. Everyone thought Julia never loved me, that she had settled for me after Marcus left the country and rejected her. To them, I was just some lucky nobody who managed to marry a famous actress. But they didn't see how our relationship grew over the years. Julia, who once couldn't even boil water, learned how to make porridge and soup for my sensitive stomach. She would act playful just to get an extra scoop of ice cream and explain every rumor before I even had a chance to ask. She stopped taking explicit roles for my sake and insisted on using body doubles for kissing scenes. At our happiest, she even asked if I wanted a child, despite knowing what it would mean for her career. For 3 years, I believed what we had was real. Until the day I was diagnosed with a terminal illness. I never told her. We hadn't even settled on a name for our first child yet. Then Marcus came back. His overseas project had failed, and his family name had been dragged through the mud. He needed money, and Julia, being the person she was, threw him that party at one of the city's most extravagant bars. That night, they talked for hours, and a quiet fear gnawed at me. Still, I held on to the hope that what we had was real, even if it felt fragile now. When Julia and I arrived, the air was already thick with tension. Marcus sat drinking with a man, his face flushed. "Didn't you say you needed investments, Mr. Walker?" the man taunted. "Fine, I'll drink 1 cup, and you drink 10. If you can outdrink me, I'll invest in you right now." Marcus smiled, unconcerned, and drank cup after cup. But when Julia and I walked in, his expression shifted. His smirk faded. He lowered his head and drank even faster, nearly choking as he coughed. Seeing us together rattled him, and people noticed. The crowd jeered. "Weren't you and Julia a couple before, Mr. Walker? Why not ask the great actress for help? She's had plenty of scandals. It wouldn't be a surprise if she supported you." Bang! Marcus suddenly punched the man to the ground. "You bastard!" the man spat, staggering to his feet. "Dare to hit me? Forget the investment. I'll sue you." Marcus's voice was raw with anger. "Say whatever you want about me, but don't you dare drag Julia into this. I'm the one who wronged her." I felt Julia's grip on my hand tighten. Her body tensed beside me. Then she smiled, her voice sharp and cold. "You can joke about anything," she said, "but my husband is right here. Marcus is nothing but a disgusting scumbag. There's no way I would help him." The mood shifted instantly. The same people who had mocked us moments ago suddenly showered us with praise, calling us a model couple, the perfect pair in the industry. I smiled faintly but felt a strange chill creep into my chest. Julia rarely invited me to parties. She knew I didn't like them. So why did she bring me here tonight? Was it for Marcus? If he weren't here, Would she have even come? The man Marcus had punched sneered, straightening his suit. I heard the Walker family is bankrupt, he said. You still think you're the same young master from 3 years ago? He smirked. If you kneel and lick my shoes clean, I won't sue you. Hell, I might even invest in you. He lifted his foot, stained with spilled alcohol, relishing the humiliation. Marcus stood still, his fists clenched so tight his knuckles turned white. And just as everyone expected him to lash out, he dropped to one knee. The room fell silent. I noticed Julia staring at him, the once proud and untouchable Marcus Walker, now kneeling for a few million. His voice came out hoarse. He looked up, his eyes glistening. I'm not kneeling for your money. I'm apologizing. To the woman I hurt 3 years ago. I was a fool who didn't know how to cherish her, and because of that, I lost the most precious thing in my life. I'm sorry. I regret it more than anything. Tension hung thick in the air. Everyone realized he was apologizing to Julia. And me? I was standing right there, her husband. What was I supposed to do? The man who had humiliated Marcus scowled, his pride wounded. With a sharp kick, he knocked Marcus to the ground. Enough, Julia snapped, stepping forward, her voice ice cold. My manager and lawyer will handle the compensation, she said. Now get out. Julia's commanding presence left no room for argument. The man, humiliated, turned and left without another word. The room fell silent, and all eyes landed on me, expecting me to step up and take my wife home. But before I could move, a wave of dizziness crashed over me. My vision blurred, and I barely managed to cup my hand over my nose as warm blood trickled down. I rushed outside to clean myself up. Julia couldn't see me like this. By the time I returned, the room was empty. A waiter informed me that Julia had paid the bill and left, with Marcus. I went home, but sleep never came. The hours dragged by, and still, Julia didn't return. At 3 a.m., I saw a post on her Weibo account, a photo of her asleep on a couch, her delicate profile resting against the cushions. The caption read, "You are the soft spot beneath my hard armor." The comments section exploded. Shippers were ecstatic. The fallen noble young master and the stunning movie queen. My ship has finally resurrected. Someone wrote, they were the hottest couple 3 years ago. Finally, they're back together. Others cheered her on. Support Julia in rekindling her love. And then there were the cruel ones. I can't stand that ugly man, Adrian. No physique, no looks. He doesn't match our movie queen at all. I clenched my jaw, scrolling through the relentless comments. But despite the insults, a strange sense of relief settled over me. At least she hadn't slept with him. Then, someone posted a photo of Julia and me in the comments. In it, I wore a simple plaid shirt, standing beside her. I wasn't ugly, but compared to Julia, glamorous, radiant, effortlessly beautiful, I looked painfully ordinary. My stomach churned. Ugly men should stay away from beautiful women. Support the movie queen's divorce. She deserves better. They don't even look like a couple. The shippers dug up old pictures of Julia and Marcus from 3 years ago, each shot looking like a perfect scene from a romantic film. A handsome man and a breathtaking woman. The flawless match. Julia, don't settle for ugly guys. Find someone who matches your beauty. Female stars, repeat after me. Don't date ugly men. Never marry them. The wave of mockery quickly spiraled into something bigger. It became a trending topic, a full-blown campaign against female celebrities dating unattractive men. Then Julia made everything worse. With one simple post, she set the internet ablaze. I don't like ugly men. And no, I didn't get back with Marcus. People cheered, claiming the movie queen had finally regained her taste. As I stared at the screen, a deep chill spread through my chest. My hands trembled. My vision blurred. Before I could react, I felt the familiar warmth of blood trailing down my face, staining my clothes. Dizzy and barely able to keep myself upright, I fumbled for my phone and called Patrick. Take me to the hospital, I rasped, and clean up the blood at home. Julia, she can't stand the sight of it. My voice faded. Darkness swallowed me whole. When I opened my eyes, Patrick stood beside the hospital bed, his face dark with frustration. His eyes were red, and when he spoke, his voice dripped with bitterness. Adrian, you're pathetic, he said coldly. You threw away your rightful place as heir for her. And now, your wife is gone. You're dying. And you're lying here like this. Isn't it ridiculous? I exhaled slowly, relieved to find I was still breathing. She doesn't know about the illness, I murmured. This is my choice. A weak smile tugged at my lips. It was ironic, really. I was the real son of the Walker family, the true heir. I had gone missing as a child, and in my absence, Marcus was adopted and raised as the family's successor. I only found out in college, right around the time I fell for Julia. Back then, she was dating Marcus. I hesitated before continuing. I used my status as the real heir to force Marcus to break up with her and leave the country. The deal was simple. I'd stay out of the Walker family's affairs forever, and he could never tell Julia the truth. A dry chuckle escaped me. But now, the Walker family is bankrupt. Marcus is back, trying to take Julia from me. And I'm here, terminally ill, completely powerless. I sighed. Maybe this is karma. Patrick clenched his jaw. Then divorce her, Adrian. Walk away with dignity. His voice softened slightly. Afterward, I'll take you to Ladakh. Didn't you always want to go? My throat tightened. Ladakh. I had dreamed of seeing the vast grasslands, the clear blue skies, the endless lavender fields. More than anything, I had wanted to honor the woman who raised me, the orphanage grandmother who had once told me she was from Ladakh. She had always wanted to return to her homeland, but she never got the chance. I had asked Julia countless times if we could go together. She always agreed in passing, but work always came first. There was always another film, another project. I met Patrick's eyes. He wasn't joking. He just wanted my last days to mean something. I swallowed hard. Let me think about it, I whispered. But deep down, I wasn't ready to let go. What if Julia truly loved me? What if she couldn't bear to leave me? How could I walk away first? When I got home, Julia rushed toward me, her face full of worry. She grabbed my hand tightly. I didn't post that Weibo, she blurted out. I fell asleep on the couch. Marcus posted it himself. As soon as I saw the news, I came home right away. She frowned, scanning my face. Where were you? You look so pale. I forced a smile and lowered my head, wrapping my arms around her waist. I inhaled her familiar scent, but underneath it, faint but unmistakable, was the scent of men's cologne. I'm fine, I lied. I believe you, she murmured, relaxing into my embrace. I closed my eyes. Forget it. I didn't want to fight anymore. But things online only got worse. A few days later, Marcus sent me a message. He wanted to meet. When I arrived at his house, the air was thick with smoke. Empty whiskey bottles cluttered the table. He took a slow drag from his cigarette before exhaling and gesturing toward the seat across from him. Sit, he said. I sat down, pouring myself a glass of water as he leaned back, his eyes sharp and calculating. My purpose for returning is simple, he said flatly. I came to take back my woman. You know exactly what I mean, don't you, Adrian? I met his gaze and smiled faintly. Julia is my wife. We're legally married. Aren't you the one playing the homewrecker? Sounds a little delusional, don't you think? He paused. Then, slowly, he extinguished his cigarette, his expression unreadable. You've changed since high school, he murmured. If it weren't for Patrick stopping me, I would have beaten you to a pulp. And now you think you can talk big? I shrugged casually. Go ahead. Hit me now. I'll drop to the ground and claim $50,000 in compensation. Oh, wait. Your family's bankrupt. Guess you're better off entertaining investors over drinks. Or maybe you could get a job at a club. I hear they pay well. His expression twisted with rage. In a flash, he grabbed a bottle and hurled it across the room before throwing a powerful left hook at me. I dodged effortlessly and countered with a punch straight to his stomach. He staggered back, clutching his midsection, his face turning pale. You ungrateful bastard, he spat, reaching for a stick nearby. I braced myself to dodge, but before I could react, a sudden wave of dizziness hit me. My vision blurred, my body swayed, and I stumbled forward. His blows landed hard, one after another, until I collapsed, coughing up blood. Pain shot through my ribs as he stood over me, sneering. I thought you'd be tougher, he mocked. But 3 years later, you're still just trash. He tossed the stick aside and crouched down, his expression filled with triumph. Just then, a familiar voice cut through the tension. What's going on here? I turned toward the doorway. Julia stood there, holding a fruit basket, her expression stunned. Her eyes darted to the blood-stained floor before she rushed toward us, her face tightening in a frown. Marcus, why did you hit Adrian? She demanded. Don't you know he's not in good health? Marcus's eyes reddened slightly, but he held back his emotions. He called me a homewrecker and came here to start a fight, he said stiffly. So I fought back. Julia, do you really think I'd interfere in someone's marriage? His words struck something in her. Her expression softened, and she let out a sigh. Then she turned to me. Adrian, go home. I'll handle this. A sharp pain throbbed in my stomach, but it was nothing compared to the ache in my chest. Julia, come home with me, I pleaded. I'm hurt. Her gaze wavered, filled with hesitation and sadness. Go home, she said quietly. I'm having dinner with Marcus. I don't want to see you right now. I swallowed hard, forcing a bitter smile as I clutched my side, the pain searing. Why? I'm your husband. Tears welled up in her eyes, laced with guilt and sorrow. Then tell me, Adrian, why did you force Marcus to leave the country and break up with me 3 years ago? She whispered. Wasn't that wrong? Her words cut deep. My mind went blank as a cold emptiness spread through my chest. Before I could say anything, Marcus stepped in between us, his smirk full of satisfaction. There's nothing more to say, he said smugly. The truth is out. Adrian, you're done. His eyes gleamed with Adrian-y as I staggered back, another sharp nosebleed dripping onto my shirt. Humiliated, I turned and left. It's okay, I told myself, trying to ignore the pain. Julia will forgive me. I made mistakes, but they're in the past. This isn't the end. But I was wrong. When I woke up in the hospital, the internet was in flames. Marcus had selectively leaked parts of our past agreement, making me out to be the villain who had forced him away from Julia. My reputation was in ruins. The online outrage was brutal. He's disgusting. A total scumbag. Julia, divorce him immediately. Why isn't this illegal? Even my home address was exposed. Angry mobs gathered outside my house, vandalizing my property. They hurled rotten eggs, vegetables, even human waste. I barely reacted. I had endured worse. Then, one day, it escalated. A rock came flying at me, striking my head. I collapsed. As darkness crept in, I vaguely saw Julia running toward me, panic written all over her face. I'm bleeding, I thought hazily. Will Julia be scared? Then, my mind drifted into memories from the past. Marcus had always harbored resentment toward me. No matter how hard he tried, he was always second to me. His bullying throughout high school was relentless. He poured water on me, tore up my homework, beat me up, and smeared glue on my chair. The teachers turned a blind eye, unwilling to go against the powerful Walker family. The most they ever did was warn him, saying, Adrian has a future. He might get into MIT. But the abuse never stopped. After my grandmother passed away, I had no home and ended up in an orphanage. One day, during her visit, she saw Marcus and his gang cornering me in an alley. Despite being nearly 70, she charged at them, striking Marcus with her cane in fury. But Marcus, enraged, shoved her to the ground. She collapsed instantly. A heart attack. She never got back up. The Walker family acted quickly, offering me a large sum of money, enough to pay for my university expenses. But there was a condition. Bury the incident. With tears streaming down my face, I accepted. There was no justice to be found. Marcus was a minor, untouchable by the law, but I couldn't keep their blood money. Instead, I donated every cent to the orphanage, fulfilling my grandmother's last wish, to care for more children. Even now, seeing her empty room brought an unbearable sorrow. Back then, I vowed to one day make Marcus pay. Later, Patrick entered my life, becoming my protector. He helped me get through high school and kept me safe. In college, I met Julia. She was beautiful and kind, the kind of person who seemed to shine. But at the time, she was dating Marcus. Then, during a routine medical checkup, everything changed. The results revealed something strange, a genetic condition exclusive to the Walker family bloodline. Suspicious, I secretly took a strand of Mrs. Walker's hair and ran a DNA test. The results were undeniable. The very woman who had silenced the truth about my grandmother's death, the woman who protected Marcus at all costs, was my biological mother. Hatred burned inside me. I refused to return to the Walker family unless I took back what was rightfully mine. So, I confronted Marcus, and like always, he chose wealth over love. Without hesitation, he abandoned Julia in exchange for the Walker fortune. His only justification? Money is the only thing that truly matters in this world. Without a second thought, he left the country, walking away from Julia without looking back. Years passed, and then Marcus reappeared, completely unbothered by what he'd done, determined to take everything from me. But I wasn't about to let that happen. I had fought too hard to build a life with Julia, and I wasn't going to let him rip it apart. Then one day, I woke up groggy in a hospital bed and saw Julia asleep beside me. Her face was bare, her exhaustion evident. I reached out, gently running my fingers through her hair until she stirred. "You're awake," she whispered, her voice shaking. "Adrian, are you okay?" "I'm fine," I told her, though the moment I did, she broke down sobbing. "You say that, but you're sick, and it's terminal," she choked out between her tears. I pulled her close, holding her tightly. Don't worry. I'll get better. Don't forget. I'm your miracle man. Her eyes widened in shock. You? You're the miracle man who helped me when I was a kid? I nodded. When we were 7, I found you lost on the street, crying for your mother. I promised to help, and after days of searching, I finally found her shop and brought you back to her. Tears streamed down Julia's face as she listened. Soon after, she made a public statement clearing my name and declaring her unwavering love for me. In front of her fans, she boldly said, I will never divorce Adrian. If you don't like him, feel free to unfollow me. It was the first time she had ever directly responded to the online rumors, and the shift was immediate. People began to admire our relationship instead of criticizing it. Julia and Adrian actually look great together. She doesn't even do kissing scenes anymore. That's real love. Since being with Adrian, Julia seems so much happier. She smiles more, spends holidays with him. She clearly married the right man. You all say Marcus and Julia were the perfect couple, but it never felt real. The way she looks at Adrian, that's genuine love. Am I the only one who thinks Adrian isn't ugly? He's just a little too thin, that's all. Julia put everything on hold to take care of me, pushing back all her film projects. But Marcus wasn't ready to let her go. One afternoon, she sat by my bedside, lovingly feeding me soup she had made herself, her eyes full of tenderness. Then her phone rang. The moment she saw the caller ID, her entire expression changed. She set the spoon down and stepped out of the room to take the call. I waited. The soup grew cold. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in fading shades of orange and blue. But Julia never came back. She didn't answer my messages. That night, hunger clawed at my stomach, my body weak and trembling. A sharp pain throbbed in my head, and before I knew it, my nose started bleeding. A nurse making her rounds found me pale and barely conscious, then rushed me to the emergency room. When I woke up, voices were raised outside my room. Just leave Adrian alone, damn it. That was Patrick, his voice tight with fury. He gave up being the Walker family heir for you. He's practically dying, and you still can't let him go? I know I hurt him, Julia sobbed. Don't play the victim. Patrick snapped. If I didn't have a rule against hitting women, you'd be on the ground right now. The moment Marcus called, you ran straight to him, leaving Adrian here to nearly die in a hospital bed. He said he was in a car accident, she stammered. I panicked. I had to go to him. Enough. Patrick cut her off, his voice cold. Go wherever you want, but divorce Adrian. Set him free. Silence followed, broken only by Julia's muffled cries. Lying in that bed, listening to their argument, I took a slow breath and called out, Patrick, come in. They both entered, and for the first time, I looked Julia in the eyes without warmth. Let Patrick stay, I said calmly. You can leave. She stared at me in disbelief, as if she couldn't process what she had just heard. Maybe it was the first time I had ever treated her with such coldness. She bit her lip, turned on her heel, and stormed out. The soup had gone cold, just like my heart. Lying there in that hospital bed, on the verge of death, my mind didn't wander to Julia or even Marcus. Instead, I thought of Ladakh. I had always heard that the sacred mountains and lakes there could sense a person's heart. I wanted to go, to scatter my grandmother's ashes in that holy place and tell her that, after all these years, I had finally brought her home. Turning to Patrick, I gave him a faint smile. Brother, let's go to Ladakh. He rubbed my bald head with a grin, eyes glistening with unshed tears. If you don't feel like smiling, then don't. She's just a woman. We don't need her. We'll go to Ladakh together, all right? All right, I murmured, feeling lighter than I had in a long time. Julia, I'm done waiting for you. You left me for Marcus once. You could do it again. I can't spend my life hoping you'll finally choose me. This time, your miracle man has to live for himself. Ladakh was breathtaking. Wrapped up in a thick down jacket and a hat, I followed in Patrick's footsteps, making my way up the snowy mountains toward the Potala Palace. The scenery was unlike anything I had ever seen, and in that vast, untouched beauty, I laid my grandmother to rest in the most sacred place I could find. As we stood in the square, a group of people nearby prostrated themselves in prayer, their devotion mesmerizing to watch. Curious, I cleared my throat and softly asked a man beside me, "What are they praying for?" In broken English, he answered, "They pray with pure kindness, wishing for peace and happiness for all living beings." Patrick and I stood there, taking it all in. There really were people in this world untouched by greed, uncorrupted by power or money, pure-hearted souls who simply wished for peace. As the golden sun rose over the mountains, thoughts of my own death crept into my mind. But instead of fear, I felt an overwhelming sense of clarity. "Patrick," I said suddenly, a new resolve burning in my chest. "I want to prostrate too." He turned to me in shock. "Are you out of your damn mind? You're already sick. Doing this will only make things worse." But I just smiled, shrugged off my scarf, and bought the necessary pilgrimage gear from a street vendor. I was going to make the journey from Lhasa to Mount Yala, just as my grandmother had once dreamed of doing. I didn't care about the cost. I wanted to experience its beauty with my own eyes. I wanted to feel it with my own heart. Patrick followed behind reluctantly, carrying medicine and constantly worrying about my fragile condition. The pilgrimage stretched nearly 1,100 kilometers, a grueling test of endurance. It didn't take long before Julia's fans recognized me. One even started a live stream, mocking me in a sarcastic tone. "Look at this shameless husband of the famous movie queen, prostrating just to get attention. Unbelievable." More viewers poured into the stream, laughing along as one smug live streamer sneered, "There's no way this guy finishes the pilgrimage. Everyone knows how brutal it is." I ignored them. Step by step, I continued to prostrate, inching forward despite my knees being scraped raw. Blood from my nose occasionally dripped onto the cold ground, but I never said a word of complaint. This was the path my grandmother had dreamed of walking, and I would honor her journey with every step. Days passed. 1, 2, 10. The live stream audience, once filled with mockery, began to change. At first, they had ridiculed me, but as my body weakened and my forehead and knees became covered in cuts and bruises, their tone shifted. They watched in shock as I pressed forward, unyielding. Even when a doctor familiar with my terminal condition revealed my diagnosis on the stream, I paid no attention. Public opinion transformed. Where there was once ridicule, there were now apologies. People who had laughed at me before began to express admiration. But I remained indifferent, focused only on my journey, on each prostration, on the donations I made at every stop. Eventually, that arrogant live streamer, the one who had taunted me from the start, couldn't hold back his curiosity and asked through the broadcast, "Why do you donate so much money, Adrian?" I hesitated for a moment before looking into the camera and answering, "Because I'm an orphan. I hope the money can bring a bit more luck to other orphans in the world." The internet exploded. Investigators soon dug into my past, uncovering my life story. A top student abandoned as a child, yet someone who fought hard to survive and succeed on his own. Smiling faintly, I continued, "Actually, I wasn't originally an orphan. I got lost as a child and was taken in by the orphanage. I've always been grateful to them." With that, I resumed my pilgrimage, leaving behind yet another wave of shock online. People began a relentless search for my biological parents, some driven by guilt, others by curiosity. Meanwhile, back home, everything was spiraling into chaos. Patrick, who kept me updated, described the situation in vivid detail. A fierce public confrontation between Julia and Marcus had been secretly recorded and leaked online. On a busy street, Julia, dressed in a pristine white suit, her face stricken with pain, slapped Marcus across the face, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Why did you do this to Adrian?" she demanded, her voice trembling. "What did he ever do to you?" Marcus, his eyes bloodshot, retaliated with a vicious kick, shocking the onlookers. "What kind of man hits a woman?" someone gasped. Whispers spread quickly. "Scum man and trash woman. They deserve each other," another voice muttered in disgust. But Marcus remained unfazed. Straightening his jacket, a cold smile tugged at his lips. "He played me first," he sneered. Then, he dropped a revelation that left the crowd in stunned silence. The truth? Adrian was never supposed to be part of the Walker family. He wasn't just lost. He was deliberately abandoned because of his congenital, incurable disease. They didn't want a weak heir tarnishing their reputation, so they dumped him at an orphanage. Julia's eyes widened in shock as Marcus continued, his voice laced with bitterness. "I was a fool to break up with you back then. Now there's a perfect chance to make things right. Why won't you be with me?" Standing tall despite her bruises, Julia gritted her teeth and declared resolutely, "I'd rather die than be with you. I already have someone I love, and we are truly happy." Marcus's face twisted with fury. "You're pathetic," he spat bitterly. "The only reason I broke up with you in the first place? I got tired of you. You're not even that pretty." His words turned even more cruel. "Your body? Completely average. Your personality? Even worse. I can't understand why Adrian used every ounce of his energy to love you. If it weren't for your money, do you really think I would have stayed? I've slept with you so much I'm sick of it." Julia trembled, her hands clenching into fists. Her eyes burned red, her heart shattering from his words. But in that moment, she realized the bitter truth. The only person who had ever truly cared for her was the one she had hurt the most. Determined to atone, she wiped her tears and hardened her expression, the cold and stoic demeanor of the superstar she had become taking over. "The Walker family will never rise again," she declared icily. "Every single one of you will be buried, including you. You owe Adrian 2 lives." Turning on her heel, she walked away, leaving Marcus behind. He let out a deranged laugh. "What about you?" he shouted mockingly. "Are you without fault?" Tears streamed down Julia's face, but she bit her lip and kept walking. Her mind was fixated on Adrian. Frail, scarred, and injured in Ladakh. The thought of his suffering cut through her like a knife. She longed to bring him back, knowing his time was limited, but she couldn't face him yet. Not until justice was served. As Julia meticulously laid out her plans, the internet buzzed with a viral article detailing Adrian's tragic life story. It chronicled his abandonment by the Walker family, discarded at an orphanage due to his illness. It revealed the torment he had endured at Marcus's hands during high school, which ultimately led to his grandmother's death from a heart attack. It also highlighted how Adrian had once saved Julia's life in college, only to be betrayed when Marcus abandoned her for power and status. The article included heartbreaking photos. Adrian as a frail child in the orphanage, Adrian being bullied in school, Adrian standing at his grandmother's funeral with a numb expression. The final pictures showed him now, thin, terminally ill, his head shaved, his body weak. Yet even in Ladakh, despite everything, he remained calm and resolute, continuing his pilgrimage with quiet determination. The public was outraged. As more of Marcus's vile deeds came to light, the backlash grew stronger. His gambling addiction, his history of bullying, his reckless lifestyle. The truth about his so-called love for Julia was revealed. It had been nothing more than a cruel bet. He had wagered that he could win over the school beauty within 3 months, purely to humiliate Adrian. Then, the final blow. The Walker family's bankruptcy had been caused by Marcus himself. His reckless gambling while living abroad had drained their fortune, leaving them with nothing. Julia, now resolute, refused to let him escape justice. She paid investigators to dig up every last piece of evidence against him. And then, she exposed him completely. Soon enough, Marcus was arrested and charged with a slew of crimes, including fraud and drug trafficking. This time, the Walker family couldn't bail him out. After making sure Marcus was securely locked away, Julia rushed straight to Ladakh. The scorching sun burned her delicate face as she finally reached me, her eyes locking onto my body, covered in scars. Overcome with guilt and sorrow, she collapsed into tears, dropping to her knees. "Please, Adrian," she sobbed, "come to the hospital with me. We'll get you to the best doctors. You can get better. Just stop doing this to yourself." But I didn't look at her. I just kept prostrating, my expression unshaken. "I never cheated on you," she cried desperately. "He lied about the car accident. He begged me for help. I was so foolish, but I swear, I've always loved you. Aren't you my miracle man?" Her voice broke as she knelt in the dirt, her bare face raw and unmade up. "I've avenged you," she pleaded. "The whole Walker family is gone. I didn't lend Marcus a single penny. Please, Adrian, just look at me." Tears poured down her face as she begged for forgiveness, but I remained silent, my mind fixed on my pilgrimage. When I finally heard her sigh, I paused, turned to face her, and spoke firmly. "I don't love you anymore. We're done." Her eyes filled with tears, and she shook her head in disbelief. "I'm still your wife," she insisted stubbornly, refusing to let go. I glanced up at the sky, where kites fluttered and eagles soared. "That's just a piece of paper," I said quietly. "It's meaningless. When I loved you, Julia, I would have died for you. But that love is gone. No matter what you do now, it doesn't matter to me." Without waiting for a response, I added coldly, "Go back. I'll finish this journey alone." But Julia didn't leave. She and Patrick stayed behind, silently watching as I continued my pilgrimage, frustration gnawing at me. The journey stretched 1,100 kilometers, grueling, with unpredictable weather. Sometimes rain, sometimes blistering sun. But I kept moving, step by step, slowly finding clarity within myself. The weight of pain, sadness, and anger that once burdened me seemed to dissolve with each passing mile, replaced by an unexpected peace. In the end, my hereditary illness finally caught up to me. My body was racked with unbearable pain, my breathing shallow, blood dripping from my nose. I collapsed at Namso Lake, one of Ladakh's largest and most sacred bodies of water, often called the Heavenly Jewel. Julia and Patrick panicked, rushing to call for help, but I weakly stopped them. As I lay there, I felt like I was back in my grandmother's arms, her comforting warmth enveloping me. The sky above me stretched on, vast and sapphire blue. I remembered her parting words just before she passed. Her silver-white hair fanned out on the ground like a forgotten heroine from an old black-and-white movie. Her lips were dark, her face pale with hints of purple, but her eyes held such quiet resolve. "Adrian," she had whispered softly, "we cry when we are born, so why shouldn't we smile when we say goodbye?" Patrick was beside me now, his face flushed red and soaked in tears. His sobs were uncontrollable, his grief twisting his features. Despite the agony, I managed a faint smile. "We cry when we are born, so why shouldn't we smile when we say goodbye?" I said quietly. Patrick froze, his sobs faltering as if those words hit him hard. Through the blur of my fading vision, I saw him the way I had once seen my grandmother, frail but peaceful. I smiled, a mix of laughter and tears rising in my fading consciousness. I stopped breathing, but at least in this life, I had loved, lost, and fought. In the end, I had fulfilled my wish of becoming part of my grandmother's family forever, accompanying her to the heavens. Now, let's take a look from Patrick's perspective. The first time I met Adrian, I knew he was different. Beneath that frail body was a strength most people didn't have. Even though Marcus bullied him nonstop for 2 years, he never complained. He just stayed silent and focused, always at the top of his class. We first crossed paths in the infirmary during senior year military training. From that day on, I promised myself I'd look out for this kid. He hit me in a way I couldn't explain. Later, when we both made it into college, I found out something shocking. Adrian was actually the heir to the prestigious Walker family. What's even crazier was that he was willing to give up that life for love. I couldn't believe it at first. "You're crazy," I told him back then. I just couldn't understand how someone could be so devoted. But he just laughed, those frail shoulders carrying a weight most couldn't fathom. "You don't get it," he said. "This is love." He married Julia, and for a while, it seemed like everything was perfect. Then Marcus came back, and chaos followed. Adrian's world crumbled. His family was gone. His grandmother died because of Marcus, and even Julia couldn't hold it together. It would have broken anyone. I remember the fury I felt when I saw Adrian getting cyberbullied, while Marcus strutted around, unscathed. That's when I decided I needed to expose the truth. I wrote an essay, gathered evidence, and waited for the right moment to release it. I wanted to clear Adrian's name and show the world what he'd been through. When Adrian nearly died, I thought Julia's efforts to clear his name online might be a sign of redemption, but her betrayal still haunted him. He didn't want to stay in this world anymore. Ladakh became his escape, the place he had always dreamed of visiting with his grandmother. So, I took him there. At the Patala Palace, he scattered her ashes. Even though his body was frail, he insisted on completing the 1,100-kilometer pilgrimage. As his body withered away, the fire in his eyes returned when Julia came back, begging for forgiveness. But he rejected her and chose to keep moving forward. Adrian died under the brilliant sky at Namso Lake, a smile on his face. "We cry when we're born, so why shouldn't we smile when we say goodbye?" he said, and with that, he took his last breath. I buried him with that smile under the bright sun, my heart breaking as I whispered, "Brother, you really did choose a beautiful place." Through blurred vision, I looked up at the endless sky. In the next life, Adrian will still be my brother. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel. See you soon.